Hello, everybody. This is Steel Rose's podcast. This podcast was created for women by women to elevate women's voices. I have a very special guest here with me today that I'd like to introduce all of you to. Miss Dawna Campbell, known as the Mind Whisperer, provides the insights and tools you need to pave your way to abundance, prosperity, and love. With over 25 years of transformative expertise, Dawna's unique ability to reshape the subconscious mind ensures you achieve happiness and prosperity in all areas of your life. Dawna, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so excited.
I am thrilled to hear more about you. So I would love to hear your story. I would love to hear what your focus is and how you are impacting people's lives.
Yeah, a little bit about my backstory and with what I do today. You always are your own first client, it seems. And so for me, there was a period in my life where I was managing an investment firm. I was responsible for $500 million of other people's money, but the stress, the worry, the pressure of everything really broke down my health. And after 2 years, doctors in Western medicine were not able to discover what was wrong with me. So I ended up going to a naturopathic doctor who did energy healing medicine. And she figured out that I couldn't digest food and gave me some enzymes and then said, because in Oriental medicine, you're not digesting food, you can't digest what's in the outside world. But don't go looking for it. It'll surface. Well, 3 months later, what surfaced was I learned about the infidelity of my marriage, and my husband at that time was unfaithful. So I left the marriage with my 2 kids. I moved to an ashram, which was a spiritual living community, because I really wanted to take a year, a sabbatical, to understand me, because I was the common factor with those 2 things. And then from there, I went to go re-enter the workforce after the sabbatical. And instead of my firm bringing me back on, I was let go because it was also during the global recession during that time. So I became financially devastated. So those 3 things happened all within a 4 to a 5 year time period. And so it really put me onto this healing path. And there were some other situations where I just made a promise to the universe, to Creator, that if I and my children were kept safe, I would dedicate my life to this healing world. And here I am 25 years later. You cannot not do what you're meant to do. So your purpose finds you, I believe. So that's a little bit about my backstory.
I am very much of the mindset of like intuition and intuitive feelings. And I talk quite a bit on other episodes about getting this sense of something. And at that last part there where you were talking about the alignment with, the Creator. And I know everyone has it, and I'll say this, everyone has different names. I go with Creator, I go with universe. I will say a lot of the things, but most of the time, it's God. Like, we're talking about a larger being than ourselves. That's really what we're talking about. And when you said that, I got chills because I felt that alignment. Yes. And it's crazy because we're virtual. It's not, I'm not in the same room with you, but I could feel that little energy burst come off from you. And honestly, you're in alignment with what you're doing. So you went through this really terrible trauma, and through that trauma, you were able actually to be pointed in a direction that you were supposed to be going in.
Yes, absolutely. Our purpose always finds us. I didn't wake up as a little kid saying, oh, I think I'm going to be a healer and they're going to call me a mind whisperer and they're going to do. No, I remember when my mom asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I told her I was going to join Greenpeace and save the whales. And that wasn't the right answer. It was, no, you could be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or a scientist. So that was when I began to start learning to tell people what I think they wanted to hear. Otherwise, I was in trouble. That was not a good defining moment in my life there, because I really did get in trouble for not giving the right answer to what my mom wanted. So I think we're conditioned in a lot of different ways through society, through all of our experiences, instead of really exploring who your authentic self is. And that was the time that I had at that spiritual living community, because I got to explore all the aspects of me and everything was embraced. And then that's when the purpose shows itself, because if you know how to vibrationally change from these initiations, those trauma events, you know the pathway and you can help other people. And I really believe that's why we're here, to be of service to help other people on their journey, to create the world a better place, to lift the vibration. Now we're in the age of Aquarius, so it happens even faster. So I really think our purpose finds us.
I wholeheartedly agree, which is why this podcast exists, actually. Because I had gone through this period of, I had a similar answer to your Greenpeace answer when I was little. I wanted to save the world. That's actually what I had said. I want to help people. I want to save the world. I want to affect change. And I was a kid. I was a very young child. I think I might have been kindergarten, first grade age. And I had this vision, and I wanted to have almost like an advocacy center. And I used to tell my mom, I want kids to be able to come and I'll help them with their homework. And they kind of just, oh, that's adorable, move on, carry on your way. And then, flash forward 15 or so years or whatever it was, or 10 years when I was in high school and my parents divorced. And that one experience totally shot me off into a whole different direction. Because when I was in high school, I very much wanted to go into creativity and creative writing. I loved it. I had a creative spirit, and I still wanted to go down that route of like helping people. And then with my parents' divorce, I observed my mom basically in financial ruin, and, my dad doing his own thing. And to me, I said at 16, I was like, I'm never going to let anyone put me in this position. Yeah. I'm going to make sure that I'm never in a position where someone can just do this to me. And I took all those little dreams that I had and I put them in a box and I put them to the side. And I was like, you're going to college and you're going to get a corporate job and you're going to climb the corporate ladder and you're going to kick ass. And I remember people, like, I had relatives that were like, well, if you want to be a mom, like, you can't do both. And I was like, I will do both. And I was like, very like, one of my male cousins told me, he was like, well, you really aren't going to be able to do both. At some point, you're going to have to pick. And I think I was like late teens, early 20s at that point. And I was like hell. And I took that as and I kept going. And then and this is going to sound crazy because this was only about 3 years ago, did I have that aha moment of, I'm not doing what I'm meant to be doing. I'm depressed. My anxiety is through the roof. I'm not happy. I'm working all the time. I was becoming really miserable, and I started to see it reflected in my kids. And that's when I started to revisit myself and go through a journey of like, you're not doing this right. Like, there's something else for you out there, and this isn't it. We have to figure it out. And then podcasting kind of just came back into my peer view of like, oh, you always talked about this, like, let's look into this further. And it's wild when I can look back at like all these little tiny moments that pushed me down this little river to where I was like, oh, I launched the podcast. And oh, well, now it's, originally, Dawna, it was me and my cousin on the podcast. And I started to really pick up momentum on like the vision for it and she was like, oh, for her, it was kind of just like a hobby, like a whatever. But for me, it became this calling, and it still is. It became this massive calling.
Absolutely. And I think our soul always knows, even from the time that we're little, that we're meant to do something great. And even at those young ages of 5, 6, 7, and 8, we knew. And so here we are today.
Oh, yeah. One of the most powerful meditations that I've done. So, I mean, and the listeners have heard me talk about this. Like, I mean, they're probably sick of me because I'm trying to always encourage people to meditate. But one of the meditations that I started doing a couple years back when I was going through this self-discovery phase was you meditate about your younger self, and the vision is you're on a beach somewhere or in a park or what have you, and younger you, 7-year-old you, comes to you and talks to you. And so in the meditation, you kind of go through the journey of like, well, what would 7-year-old you say? And that's when it came back to me like, well, 7-year-old you wanted to change the world. What are you doing?
Right? Why aren't you doing it?
I was like, would 7-year-old Jenny be proud of 40-year-old Jenny? I don't know.
Right? Right?
Yeah. So it's definitely interesting. But I mean, I would love to hear more from you on like, encouraging people to start the process. And I know that they can connect with you and listeners for anybody who's interested in connecting with Dawna, we're going to include all of her links in the description for the podcast. So you'll be able to access her. But when I started, it was like, I already kind of had a basis, and I had always been interested in meditation and, affirmations, visualization. Like I was lightly dipping my toe in since like 2010, roughly. So this was more of a bigger shift into like wow, I've been doing it a little bit incorrectly. So any advice for people that feel like they are out of alignment and they're trying to get themselves back into it?
Yes, it all has to go down to your own vibration, the thoughts you think, but not just the thoughts you think, the emotions you feel underneath the thoughts. Because there are so many times we hear with affirmations, or your thoughts are creating your reality, and you think the thoughts, I'm rich and abundant. But when you say that, you don't feel rich and abundant. You feel a less than, a lack energy. Who am I? Imposter syndrome in this 95-6% of the subconscious. And the emotions and the feelings are the fuel that drive the thoughts. So when you're in that misalignment and you're thinking thoughts, I'm rich and abundant, you actually have to say an affirmation 300 to 400 times a day for 3 to 4 months for it to reprogram the subconscious. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a long time to get there. So when we uncover that misalignment, we can go back to what we feel, where it's at in the body, where it got encoded in the cellular level, and then where it started from, typically from childhood, as we have already talked, and then shift and change that vibrational pattern to a different frequency. Now, the events don't change, but your frequency does. And when that happens and you think the thought, I'm rich and abundant, you feel rich and abundant. Therefore, magnetically, the universe returns that, because it's always returning your frequency to what you're sending out, no matter what you're thinking. That's how it reads it. So you asked for a tip. So here's the actual tip. Set a timer on your phone for like 2 hours and 17 minutes from the time that you're in now. And when it goes off, you stop whatever activity you're doing and assess how you truly feel, because the first step is really about creating the awareness. So we have to discover where we're at emotionally in that moment. And then the second step is identify the emotion and feeling that you're experiencing. Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it stress? Is it worry? Is it pressure? Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it happiness? Is it joy? And once you identify the feeling, if it's a feeling that you don't want, we need to release it and transform it. So what you're going to do to release and transform it is, say you're in a moment of stress and we want to have peace. So what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in oxygen. We're going to take that breath in, because when we breathe in, that's all the good things the body needs. But when we do that, we're going to focus our mind on the word peace, because it's going to drop you into a meditative state. And then when you breathe out, you're going to breathe out carbon dioxide, all the things the body doesn't need. So you're going to breathe out the word stress. So you breathe in peace, breathe out stress. It's a conscious way of making an energetic shift and change. But after 3 to 5 minutes, because it does drop you into a meditation, automatically, we gave the brain something to focus on. We alter those brainwave patterns. You're going to be more relaxed. You're going to have more focus. You're going to have more clarity. You're going to have more balance. And then when you go back to work or whatever you're doing, even though you took this quick 5-minute break, you're going to get 20 times more done in that, because you got pulled out of that stressful state, the chaos state, into that peaceful stillness state. It only took 5 minutes, but you're going to get 20 times the amount done in that same time frame, because you focused your energy. So that's a real conscious way of making a shift without permanent reprogramming. As I mentioned earlier about going to the time in childhood, that's a little deeper process, but that's something quick and easy anybody can do at any time. And the reason why I say set the timer is because we want to catch you off guard. So, it's almost 12. I got to see what I feel. No, we're not going to do that. We want it just to be random, because it's that awareness to what we're really feeling that we don't know what we feel unless we ask ourselves. So, and that process, discover, identify, release, and transform, I call it DIRT.
I love that.
Discover, identify, release, and transform. So the dirt leaves.
I love that. That's actually very cute. I love that. The other thing I want to say is I love that you said like you can take 5 minutes to do this, because I've actually been saying quite a bit. So when my kids were younger, I was always of like I have no time. Like it was just like madness all the time when the kids were little. So like from 2016 to 2019, I totally lost myself and everything about me was just gone. And now when I think back on it, it didn't have to happen that way. That's just how I did it, because I was determined to do everything myself. And now on this podcast, I continue to say, take 5 minutes. Just take 5 minutes. Go to the bathroom and close the door for 5 minutes. Like that's it. Because if you do this one step, like Dawna is saying, and you realign yourself, it does make a huge impact. And I will even use myself as an example here. Earlier in July, we had a lot of people coming to our house for the summer, and I wasn't able to meditate for about, I think it was like 6 days. I just couldn't get to it because there was too many people here and it was too much going on and I couldn't get to it. On the 7th day, I was working and something happened at work that was like a bit of a trigger for me. And immediately I was in the scarcity, like nasty mindset. And one of my, I think I scared one of my colleagues, because I'm not normally like that anymore. And I say anymore, and I really mean that, because prior to meditation, it was like, that was it for me. And so I think I scared my coworker, and I said to her, I was like, you know what? I apologize. I've been under a lot of personal stress. Let me like reset and let's just chat tomorrow. And I made it a point the next day, because it occurred to me, I was like, you haven't meditated in 6 days. You're going on your 7th and then your 8th. Like you have to meditate. You have to take that time to shift yourself back into that energy, because I was now like in an energy of scarcity and just meanness. And it was really starting to make me spiral. And so now I got myself back on calendar with like making sure I meditate every day, because if I don't, it affects all aspects of my day now.
It does. And what's really interesting is I think there's still a misnomer that meditation is sitting around and you're going om and you're doing a mudra and you're trying to make your mind blank and you're going om, and you have to do it for a really long time. And that's not necessarily true.
No.
And if you do sensory meditations like the breath work, or maybe it's a visual meditation, or maybe it's a hearing one where you focus different things with your hearing, you're giving your brain a task to do, and it will naturally go into an energy of no thought, or into an energy of imagination where you're visualizing what it is that you want. And it's not necessarily just sitting around. Meditation is a way to give yourself a mental break and turn off the brain. And when that happens, it goes through a reset position. You get more oxygen to the brain because it's going to consume the same amount of energy no matter what you're doing or no matter what thought you're thinking. But when you really focus, you can get more oxygen to the brain, which is giving your brain more food in a different way. And that mental break only has to be a couple of minutes a day.
Yeah. It's not. And you're right. It's not what you said. I had interviewed somebody for I think it was the spring season, and they said their meditation happens like when they're walking. They said she's like, I leave my phone at home and I go out at dusk and I take a 30-minute walk and I don't have any devices with me. There is nothing calling my attention. It's just me walking and breathing. And that's how she does it. Because you're right. Like the stereotypical is like, oh, you have to be sitting cross-legged on the floor, dead silent, for 45 minutes to an hour. That's the only way to do it. I was telling my stepson was interested in starting meditation. And I said to him, I was like, as a first step, because he's like, my thoughts are just always all over the place. Like, I don't think I'm going to be good at it. And I was like, it's about mindfulness, right? So I was like, your first thing you should be doing is when you're at work, he's an electrician. And I was like, when you're at work, take a minute and recognize the feeling of the tools in your hands. And focus on the feeling of the tools in your hands, because that's making you aware of something that is currently present in the moment, and it's pulling you to the moment. And once you start being able to do that practice, your mind gets to like learn that behavior, and it does help you focus yourself. And I was like, and that's just like a little first baby step into it, because I was meditating, what I thought was meditation for many years. And then 3 years ago, I found out, I was like, oh, wait, no, I don't think I've been doing this quite right. And it makes sense that like a lot of people get caught up in the buzzwords of like, oh, I'm meditating, affirmation, this and that, and, you know, in alignment and abundance. But the reality is there are actual steps involved. And the process that you just outlined too, it's very simple, but it's steps that people don't do, because you can't just sit there and say to yourself, I'm the wealthiest woman here in the world.
No,
I don't.
You still have to take inspired action, intuitive action.
Yes, exactly. And I did want you to talk a little bit more too about like emotions and people like kind of being aware of their emotions and what they're feeling in the moment, and also like how to reset themselves if they find themselves going down a bad path of emotions.
Yeah. The reset yourself is exactly what I said earlier about utilizing that breathing technique. Because when you do, you're focusing on the things that you do want, releasing in the things that you don't want. And in this time and age that we're in right now, we definitely want to really put in the intention and the focus of the things we want. Otherwise, you're going to create what you don't want. And the way the energy has magnified, it's happening much faster there. Mm-hmm. So our emotions, there's 5 major emotions that most of us go through. Now, the feelings underneath the emotions are all interconnected. So the very bottom one is about fear. Now, fear can also produce anxiety and stress. It affects the entire endocrine system. So it'll affect your adrenals. That's what puts us in the fight, flight, or freeze. It affects our cortisol levels. It affects all the different aspects in there. So we have to uncover what fear is really doing for us. And fear is just saying love is absent. I don't have any love in this moment. And so it encompasses all of that. The next emotion up is about anger. Anger is saying, I used to recognize love, but love's not here. The love's gone. So something needs to change. So something needs to change to recognize the love, because it was, and now it's not. So anger also resonates to feelings such as rage, resentment. It could be being mad, frustrated, irritated, and it affects everything in our digestive system. So in the beginning, when you heard me tell the story, I couldn't digest food. What emotional state was I in? Anger. Why? Yeah. I didn't know at the time. I could tell you all the reasons why now, but at the time I didn't realize or recognize I had been angry. The third emotion is sadness. Sadness affects the respiratory and the circulatory system. Sadness also shows up as grief, as loneliness. And what sadness is saying is, I have love on the inside, but I'm not able to express it out. And so it's holding on to it instead of allowing that love to release and to come out. The other 2 emotions that have other feelings associated with it is happiness and joy, which is the doorway or the portal or the opening for the top one, which is really love. But with the happiness and the joy, you can have peace, you can have gratitude, you can have bliss, you can have all of those good feelings. And then that's really the vibrational levels you really want to be in to transform your own energy. And then the top one is love. It's a miracle healing tone. It resonates to a 528 energy. Love in this sense is all things coming into the universe before it creates into anything. So it's about wholeness and unity, and compassion falls under that as well. And being at a state of oneness. So those are the 5 major emotions, all the different feelings that get associated with it.
Let's take a quick break.
Are you interested in podcasting but not sure where to start? My name is Jenny Benitez, and I'm here to help guide you through your podcast launch and maintenance. Check out the link in the episode description for Podcasting Unboxed, your comprehensive startup guide. I am very excited to work with you. It took me a while, and when I first started in 2010, when I first started understanding all of this and our energies, it actually started with that book, The Secret. I don't know if you remember that one coming out.
Oh, yes.
So that was like, again, by chance, it was given to me by somebody, and they said, I think you'd like this book. Like, why don't you give it a shot? And I was like, reading through it, and then I started to get really hooked. And that was like my first foyer into like, okay, visualizing and meditation. And at the time, it was prior to me meeting my husband. And so on my mind was like, I'd really like to meet somebody. And so I was looking through the chapters on like on love, and it said like, envision your person and really picture it, but not just envisioning the person, but also like, how would you feel? And like, kind of like exactly this, like aligning the emotions to the moment, because your emotions, I've said it before, is like, it's a barometer for like what's happening around you. Are you really enjoying this, or are you being here because you're obligated, kind of thing? Like, it's a barometer for what you're experiencing. But then it also, those vibrations, like if I sat there and said, I'm going to get married and find love, but I wasn't really digging deeper, like you can say that 1,000 times. It doesn't matter. If you're not really feeling that vibration is not going to go anywhere. So I spent I think it was about a year, like where I was like just visualizing and focusing and kind of just trying to surround myself with like ideas of love, because prior to that, I was very like, because of my parents' separation, I was very just anti all the things. So I spent like a year doing it. And at the end of the year, I was like, ugh, whatever. I'll just, I kind of like gave up, but like, And then like a couple of weeks later, I met my husband, and he was literally exactly as I had pictured and outlined, and the kind of profession I wanted him to have, like to a T. This was the person I was able to draw to me. And I remember being like astounded. I was like, yes. Oh, because I had stopped. I was like, I was like, it's not that serious of a thing. Like, it's fine. Like, maybe it's not for me. Maybe I'm not meant to find someone. But then he happened to come into existence in my path. And then I also had a more recent situation financially where I needed to produce a very large sum of money. I didn't know where it was going to come from. And I knew about it in like, I think December, January. And I needed it by June. And I was like, I'm not sure how this is going to come, but it'll probably be fine. And I did my meditations and everything that we've talked about here. Like, I made sure on a daily basis, I was focusing and staying focused on things. And by the deadline, the funds were available to me. And I was quite shocked, because I'm not somebody who kind of has things floating around like that. And it was just another solid example of like, this is real. This is a real thing here. Getting in alignment with the universe and what you're meant to be doing and your authenticity is crucial to your life. It's crucial to your life, and it's crucial to anybody around you who's like part of your life, because it could carry I mean, my husband's not as, into the whole meditation thing, and it has helped him too. Yeah, it's affected change in his life as well.
Absolutely. But I think you touched on something that is incredibly important, because we manifest, we create, but then we hold on to the energy ourselves of the practice. And you said it wasn't until I let go, quit doing it, and a couple of days later, he showed up. And I'm like, how did that happen? Well, the very last step in manifestation is to really release the energy and to detach from the energy that you're in, which usually happens through meditation. And you go into that energy of, it just is. And when you get there, it shows up. And sometimes we hang on to, or we hold on to so tight what we want to create in our lives, we don't allow the universe to go out to bring it back to us. It's like playing tug of war, and you're each holding an end of the rope. But it's not until you let your rope go that the universe is free to go, all right, now I'm in the sea of fish. Let me filter it all out and put the one right in front, so she knows the manifestation is there. Same thing with money. Same thing with all the things that we want to create in our lives. And we forget that step because we hold on to it. You're supposed to take inspired action, but you have to release the emotional state of the holding on too tight. Otherwise, it's never going to come.
I had changed my phrasing in my meditations this year, because I was saying, right now I say, I am open and willing to receive abundance. That's how I phrase it now. Prior to this year, I was saying, I am abundant and I am financially free. But the reality is I wasn't at the time. And so I never believed it. And I was saying the words, but like, it wasn't really lining up with like my emotions. So then I all of a sudden had one of those clicks, and I was like, oh, wait, I think I'm phrasing this wrong. Like, it's not quite right. And that ties back to, you know, what you had said about like your emotions really being like a big impact or a big factor, because somebody could sit there and say like, well, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm going to sit here and say I'm a millionaire a bunch of times, but I don't really believe it. Because then when I open my eyes, I'm living in like a studio apartment and I don't have any money or any furniture. That's all true. Yes, absolutely. You can't sit there and say you're a millionaire, but you can say, I am open and willing to accept abundance and, you know, in any form that it comes in. Because abundance doesn't just mean finances. You could, somebody could, you know, gift you, like maybe it means like you get a month free rent. You know, like there are other ways that abundance shows up, and you have to recognize that.
Yes, you do. Absolutely. And all of these things and all of these points that we've been talking about, I wrote and threaded through the story that is in The Abundant Soul. And this is a novel, and it follows a woman's journey in the corporate world and the lessons that she learns, like through meditation and through these emotions and the detaching and the letting go, and really where to be for abundance and how to recognize the abundance in the life. And so it's The Abundant Soul. So a lot of this that we're talking about falls and hits into this novel with all of these different healing principles in a story format.
That's amazing. I'm going to link that book in the description as well, listeners, just so you can take a look at it. Because I already have it in my Amazon cart, so everyone should. Because I mean, this is really, the more that you get versed in this, and the more literature you read on it, the more you look into it and really understand the process, the more that you can really affect change in your life, and it really could just change your whole trajectory. I mean, if somebody had told me 14 years ago when I met my husband, like, you're going to have 3 kids, you're going to be living in this house by the beach, and you're going to get basically the life that you've always wanted, I would have been like, oh my God, when? Like, what are we talking? Really? Like, realistically? Because at the time I would have never, ever, ever pictured any of that. I knew I knew I had wanted it, and I knew there was some vision of that, but to know that that dream was actually going to become a reality it's astounding. I mean, we look at each other every day now and we're like, this is a gift that has been given to us. And so I very much, part of, you know, having this podcast was like, I need to make sure that I'm elevating these stories. I want to make sure that other people are getting these tools, because there is so much more to the process. One thing you touched on, and I actually want to highlight a little bit, the control factor. So for a very long time, my ego was driving like all my decisions, and I was constantly trying to control everything around me, and which goes great for my professional job, but not so much for like being in alignment, because you are supposed to let go. And you touched on that, like you are supposed to let go of the emotions. And for a very long time, because of the anxiety and depression and things that I had experienced when I was younger, ego Jenny was like, I will fix everything. I'm going to save us. And it happened that way. But I had to learn very much to let all of that go. And I think that might have been one of the hardest things that I've done thus far.
Yes. Yeah. You know, control is a really interesting aspect in our lives, because when we try to control all the things outside of us, we're really trying to control our environment. And so we can respond instead of react, all of those things. But you can't control the things that are outside of you, because that would be like violating other people's free will and all the other stuff in the environment. The only thing that you can really be, quote unquote, controlling for is yourself. And that's in choosing how you feel. And that's where self-control comes in. And once you shift and you have that internal sense, then the outside environment will shift and change automatically to the vibration that you're sending out. So a lot of times we think, you know, we have to control stuff. We're just trying to control the outside external environment without realizing to go on the inside to look at the internal environment. And when you shift that vibrationally, the outside environment changes. Just as it's law.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. When I started to, as soon as I started to let that go, and as soon as I knew like, okay, you can't control all of this. Like you have to accept that people have limitations outside of you. I can't control other people. I can't control all the situations, and you accept what comes. And then also, like, I got very much in the habit of using my feelings as a barometer, as I said earlier. Like, I was always very much a people pleaser when I was younger, and I didn't want there to be any ripples. And I'm like, oh, I'll always be there for everybody's things. And it didn't matter what I had going on. I'll be there for you. And then after a while, I was like, I'm giving so much, like my cup is totally empty. Am I getting anything in return? And so when I started to recognize the amount that I was putting out and I started to draw back, for the initial reaction from everybody that I had in my inner circle at that time was very like almost violent, like violent anger of being like, why you're changing? This isn't you. This isn't the person we've come to know. And after a while I was like, no, but this is me. And I feel like for the first time I'm actually seeing myself, and you're all not seeing me. And it took a really long time. And there was a lot of relationships that I had to let go of. Because they knew the person that I really wasn't. And I needed to really just start being who I was always meant to be. And I would take stock and I would sit and say to myself, like, well, am I happy right now with what I'm doing? Like, am I happy with this person at the time, my husband, my boyfriend at the time? I was like, am I really happy with this guy, or is this really it? And I would make sure that inside I was like, yes, like this is it. Okay, I am happy. All right, well, then that means that what they're all saying is not correct. All right, I can move on from here. And it was like a constant little practice that I was doing.
It is. I had an employer for the longest time. Every time you saw them, would walk into the room. Are you happy? Are you happy? Are you happy today? And it got to the point that as soon as you saw them, you wanted to run because you knew you had to answer that question. And that was all she was worried about was, are you happy? And I had all kinds of answers like, well, I'm mostly happy today. Am I happy? That's a great question. What do I really feel? And then there was times I would say like, well, I am 86.7% happy today. And yesterday was a little bit more, but the day before was not so good. And I'm like, how am I quantifying my happiness? Why am I giving it percentage marks? And instead of looking at what was happening was I was getting into this of the rut of I'm not happy. And then I went, why am I focusing on my unhappiness? If I just focused on the happiness, then I would attract more of that. And then, so happiness is truly on the inside. It is.
Yeah, 100%. I also used to, and just the other tips that I had done, like when my early days, when I was starting to recognize, like, I think you had mentioned anger and rage earlier. I used to get these surges of rage and anger, like mid-20s, where I would just be like manic, like just enraged. And it would happen like quickly. Like, I mean, all of a sudden there'd be a trigger and I would be enraged. And one of the things that I still do to this day, if I'm feeling anxiety, I take my phone out and I look at pictures of my kids. And I had read somewhere along the way in my travels that when you are feeling depression, anxiety, rage, like those darker feelings, and you're trying to get yourself back into alignment, just look at something that actually brings you joy. Because if you look at something that's bringing you joy, you'll start to feel joy, and it will help you recover from the burst of anger or what have you, and it will reset your vibrations so that you're not drawing more anger and bad energy to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And oftentimes, in the past, we always heard about keeping that gratitude journal, because gratitude is the secret sauce to manifesting, to be thankful for the things and where you're at today. But I took and did my own little spin on it, and I talked about a happiness journal. Because if you start recording the things that truly made you happy, you will have the awareness of, one, what is happiness for you? And for me, I found that it didn't have anything to do with money. It had to do with the people in my life and the interactions and the connections I had with them.
Oh, 100%.
But it will also tell you exactly what brings that happiness to you, so you know what behaviors to reinforce to have even more.
Yeah, that's spot on to what I've been experiencing. And it's amazing to hear you say it. I have this, I I have this plaque next to my bed that says, I still remember the times when I didn't have any of the things I had now, or I wanted everything that I have today. And I remember a time, it was long before we got married and had kids, and I was going through a really bad financial crisis. And what brought me through it, and this was before I found The Secret and before I found meditation, but what brought me through it was I kept saying to myself, there's going to come a day where you're going to look back at this, you're going to survive this, and there's going to come a time you're going to look back at this and be like, I got through that situation, and now look at where I am. And it took time, but I, slowly got there. And and I'm not just talking like, because I've gone through, financial crises as you have too. And so I do understand, like, people might be sitting here thinking like, well, how am I supposed to be in a good mood? Like, look at my life. It's in shambles. Find like one thing. It really doesn't have to be anything big. It could be your cat. Like, anything that makes you feel peace is going to be that little tiny spark that's really what you need to just get the ball rolling. And then it snowballs from there. And if you just maintain your happiness with this one little tiny thing, eventually it's going to expand and ripple out. Those ripples are going to draw more happiness to you. And then you'll have 2 things, and then you'll have 3 things. And then you don't know what's going to come next. And it's going to just continue to build on that happiness ripple. And I love the idea of a happiness journal. Did you produce one, Dawna? Or did you produce one?
I do have an abundance soul journal that is out there. You can write down all your happy thoughts in there.
I love it. Yeah, because I do think that, like, sometimes I even, like, in my because I have several gratitude journals that I keep throughout the house, and I do have trouble sometimes because I'm like, oh, I'm writing the same thing every day. Like, so I think it might be fun to focus on, like, well, the happiness factor. And my kids will tell everybody. It was so cute because in their, for Mother's Day, and for like Christmas and stuff, they had to write down like things about their parents, and theirs was always like, mommy loves the sunrise, mommy loves sunsets. And they'll point out to me like the sky, and they'll say, mommy, look at how pretty the sky is. Cause they know that I like to pause, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, look, everybody, like, let's just appreciate this moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what a large part of what we're here to do, because money can buy things. It might make things a little easier. But then we think that it's going to provide all these other things, but you're still the one responsible for creating the memories and the happiness. And you can do that if you had $5. You can do that if you had $5 million.
Yeah.
Because the process is the same. What I find really interesting is when I work with clients privately, the ones that are multimillionaires have the exact same issues of the one
I'm
as
not
the ones
surprised.
that don't, because it's all on emotion, not on what is external to us.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. And I will admit, like, I also get caught up in the things, like, I like things, but it's those other moments that I try to focus on outside of the material items, because that's like really fluid. Material items come and go. You could lose everything in just one fell swoop. Like, it's the focus shouldn't be on like, oh, I've got this fancy car, but the focus is like, well, how are you feeling on this in the moment? So,
Right.
and honestly, like, that's where, when I wasn't as financially settled and when things were harder for me, and I was in a lot of like just, bad mindset situations, like focusing on those little brief moments of happiness and trying to find joy in the moment, even if it's like just you enjoying your cup of coffee in the morning. Like coffee brings me so much joy. I don't know about everybody else, but just things of that nature. So there's a lot of little elements to it, but there's, we have folks like Dawna who are here to guide us really on this journey, which I'm so grateful to you for doing this work, because I think it's so, especially in today's society with everything that's happening, you can see this massive shift of people who are not in alignment. And I talk to my husband about it all the time. I'm like, you can tell that social media has sorely impacted people, and it has thrown a lot of people off. And I think that because of everything that's happening in the world, a lot of us are losing our alignment, and we're losing our joy. And then you're going to see more and more and more of the bad things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to agree with that.
Yeah. So we need more of you.
Well,
And I'm very grateful that you have your book and everything. I'm going to make sure that I link it in the podcast for everybody just so that they can access you. This is just so important for everybody's lives. Dawna, I really greatly appreciate you coming on. Do you want to have any last final thoughts for the folks listening?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. During the time when I went through all of those traumatic events, I wrote down a mantra and I said it often. And to this day, I still share it. You learn deeper layers every single time. At least I do. And that is trust and you will believe. Believe and you will, let me start over there. Trust and you will see, believe and you will know, have faith, all is well. Follow your heart and spirit will lead you.
I love that. I love that. That's so well said. Thank you so much for that. Listeners, if you want to engage with Dawna, I'm going to include her links again in the description. Highly recommend the book. Just start your research here. This is it. Like, if you're hearing this episode might have found you for a reason. So you're probably ready to start this journey. It does not matter how old you are because I just started a couple years ago. So it doesn't matter where you are in your journey. You can start at any age and you could really just change the whole course of your life. So Dawna, thank you again for coming on the podcast. I greatly appreciate you and what you're doing. And listeners, we'll catch you on the next one.